Hey guys, Justin here. I wanted to take a quick second and let you know about Growth Now Movement Live, coming to Reading, Pennsylvania, May 30th to June 1st. This event is going to feature some of my top guests like Fabio Viviani from America's Top Chef, best-selling author and future board expert Sarah Centrella, Albie Manzo from Real Housewives of New Jersey, and many, many more. This is going to be a game-changing event. It is truly going to be a day-long rock concert for entrepreneurs, forward thinkers, and people who are ready to take their life to the next level. So if that's you, head over to gnmlive.com and grab your tickets today because prices are going up soon. Again, go to gnmlive.com now to level up your life and truly create the life of your dreams. Can't wait to see you there. What is the secret to unlocking your full potential? What makes your idols any different than you? How do you become the person you've always wanted to be in life? This is where you get all of your questions answered. My name is Justin Shank, and I sit down with some of the most epic individuals who are changing the world with their actions in business and in life. We discuss how they did it, why they pushed themselves, and more importantly, how they were able to focus on continuous growth to achieve their dreams. Welcome to the Growth Now Movement. This week, I sit down with Chris Krimitsos. Now, as you guys know, I'm a podcaster. This is what I do. I own a podcast production company. I coach podcasters on how to grow their show and get to the next level and use it as a platform. So I love when I get the opportunity to sit down with other podcasters and really talk about this medium that we have here that's really blown up over the last couple of years. And Chris is somebody who is truly a master at understanding how you can utilize podcasts, how you're able to, really kind of build a business around it. You see, Chris is actually the founder of Podfest Multimedia Expo. And if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see that I'm actually one of the speakers at this year's event, which I'm really, really excited about. Podfest has become one of the largest gatherings of podcasters in the country, and it's really become such a movement, for Chris. And as 1,000 to 2,000 podcasters gather around to learn and figure out how to really grow what it is they're doing through podcasting. I cannot wait. This episode is absolutely incredible if you are looking to level up your show, looking to learn more about what podcasting is all about, how you can use it for your own medium. And we talk about what we think is the future of podcasting. And Chris's take is rather interesting. Now, before we get to the episode, I want to invite any podcaster that is listening to this to come and learn and work with me for free for 30 days. If you go to launchfixgrow.com, you can sign up there and you get an online course and access to the podcastermind that we run, where you get to learn from me and other podcasters on how to grow your show, how to monetize, how to truly build a platform and begin speaking on stages. So again, go to launchfixgrow.com and we'll see you there. Now, without further ado, let's get into the episode with Chris Krimitsos. Chris, welcome to the Growth Now Movement, man.
Justin, thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, this interview is going to be interesting because I'm usually on other people's podcasts talking about podcasting. I don't think I've ever had anybody come on here who is as involved in podcasting as you, as somebody who's a leader who's created this incredible event. And I can't wait to really dive into Podfest and that event as well. And so why don't we just take a couple minutes, Chris, and introduce yourself and who is Chris today, and then we'll unpack how you got there.
So who is Chris today? I am a thought leader within the audio, what I call on-demand audio, podcasting. I speak all over the country on the topic. I founded a conference called Podfest Multimedia Expo. We're in our 5th year. Also founded the Florida Podcasters Association, which is a local home group that we meet every month, every second Tuesday of the month, about 40, 50 of us. Been doing that for about 5 years. And, just a thought leader in that area. And then I do a lot of consulting, not by design, but I get so many requests. I get a lot of interesting case studies that come across my desk. So when I see something interesting and I know I could help them, I'll pick up the project and spend some time throughout the year on different various projects. And we made the official documentary called The Messengers, a podcast documentary. It's about the medium of podcasting and how it was born and what compels these people to get on a mic, even though they can't see their audience, and put a message out to the world.
I love that. And so what got you into podcasting? So when did you get into podcasting and what got you into it?
The precipitous was I've done over 2,000 events, and one of the events was a meetup I used to do out in like the suburbs of Tampa Bay. And there was a gentleman that would attend my event and literally would leave the second it was over. So one day I was like, Steve, why are you leaving? Just hang out. So he and I became friends. And one day he goes, can I talk about podcasting? I'm like, sure. And he taught the next month. And honestly, man, after we had 13 people in that meetup, and I remember asking him after, so how do you do with your podcast? Like, how many people listen to it? And he goes, well, I get about 4,000 people. I go, is that yearly? He goes, no, weekly. I go, how many shows you do? He goes, I do one a week. And I was dumbfounded. Like, literally, it was like the Holy Grail. Like, here's an audience, right? And he thought when I was silent, my buddy Steve thought I was thinking that his numbers are terrible. And he said, and by the way, I knew nothing about podcasting up to that point, really. So I didn't know anything about numbers. I just knew 5,000 people listening to you. I don't care who you are. I said to him, he goes, yeah, I know. I really need to get my numbers up. I'm like, dude, I just spent a month promoting. We got 13 people in the room. You have 4,000 people when you go to in your house in your underwear talking on a mic. I mean, that's you got something special. He goes, you think so? I go, I don't think so. I know so. Yeah. And he mentioned Steve was one of the early adapters, and he had created a course. And he said, hey, someone bought my podcasting course on Udemy, and he's doing pretty good. You should follow him. He just started talking about how he's doing. His name is John Lee Dumas. So I said, all right. And this was August of 2013. So I started following John Lee Dumas, and then he started releasing like his numbers, and he launched his course. And in the beginning, John Lee Dumas was a terrible podcaster. And I think that's what helped him sell a lot of courses, because all of us that listened to it were like, if this guy could do it, I could do it. And it seems to be a running theme. So I followed that, and I went home and I said to my wife, I said, I want to do a podcast. She goes, about what? I go, I don't know, man. I'm just excited. I have a media background. I used to produce live TV shows. So this was like another entry back into media, you know?
Yeah.
And
sure.
my wife said, I want to do a podcast too. Luckily, we had a really great business consultant from the Baltimore, DC area who had moved down here in Florida. And he said, guys, you're doing 150 events a year. You both can't start a podcast at the same time because something's going to give. And he was right. So my wife had a niche. She said she wanted to do a podcast for women by women, and we called it Biz Women Rock. So I said, Katie, I'll tell you what, I'll be your marketing manager. So I'll get the psychic benefits of being part of a podcast. And I only have one request. And she goes, what's that? You are not allowed to interview men for at least the first year and a half of your show. Very weird request, but I know that my wife eventually would go outside and interview men, and I think that's great. But with any project in business, you need to be true to your niche when you're building that up. Amen. Then you could go outside that niche, you know, just like Facebook was for Ivy Leaguers, and it went outside. So she agreed. She thought it was a weird request coming from me. And her show took off. She was number one back then in New and Noteworthy, which meant something, on iTunes. And since then, my wife has also launched Meditation for Women, and she's helped hundreds of thousands of women all over the world. So it's been amazing to watch. I have 8 different podcasts I do. A lot of mine are hobby-type podcasts. Some are for business. And then I do one for kids. Like I have a series of kid-friendly podcasts for children ages 3 to 7 or 8 years old.
Yeah, that's so interesting because, you know, it's funny because you're like, oh, early adopter in 2013. And then I think there's a statistic that like 280,000 podcasts launched in 2018. Is that accurate?
You know, there's all kinds of stats, but here's the stat people need to know. There's probably 1 million niches still waiting to be claimed via a podcast. So there's just so much room. But yeah, I mean, we went from back then, I forgot what we were at. I don't know if it was like 80,000 active podcasters or 180. But it's like tripled or quadrupled since then.
Yeah, I mean it's completely gotten out of hand. And you know, as somebody like me who owns a podcast production and coaching company, and people come to me and they go, "I want to start a podcast," and this broad whole thing. One of the first things I say is, "Well, you have to keep in mind how many are out there. Let's niche down. If there's something that you're interested in, there's somebody out there who's also interested in it. So how do we get you in front of that audience?" And I don't think people think about it that way, you know?
Well, I think what happens is, and this is something, Justin, I've really thought at length, the DNA of an entrepreneur is that we see opportunity everywhere. So the problem is we have shiny object syndrome because we see the opportunity. And the challenge is, and this is very inherent within the DNA, and I don't know why it is, but we feel that if we go to pick up the penny, we're going to lose the dollar. When it's quite the opposite, right? But that's subconsciously what we think, like, oh, if we go focus on that little thing, we're never going to get the dollar, which is that other thing. So let's do all of it terribly, you know? So I agree with you. Niching is, I had a lady I was speaking last night, and she goes, can I do a cooking thing, and then can I talk about this thing, and then can I talk about religious spirituality? I said, you just named like 3 different shows. And she goes, well, why can't I do it all in the same show? And I asked her this question. I go, tell me what show you listen to that they do everything. And she looked dumbfounded because she's like, I don't. I go, exactly. You listen to a certain person for a certain thing, right? She goes, yeah, actually I do. I go, all right, well, that might tell you something.
Yeah. So, podcasting has become something that a lot of people are talking about, that, a lot of people are starting to utilize for their brands and their business. And you're somebody who did it before others were doing, and you've really become a leader in the space through live events and so on and so forth. But you had mentioned you do 150 live events a year.
I used to. Now I have 2 little kids, so I sold that business. But we used to do 150 live events for 9 or 10 years, over 2,000 events. I mean, I've done 5 cruises. I've done fishing tournaments. I've done a year-long poker tournament, sending someone to a World Series of Poker. And then I've done your normal 1-day, 2-day conferences, workshops, half-day. I've done TED Talks. I was one of the first people to get a TEDx license back then, so I did it. Wasn't a big deal. Didn't realize I should have held on to that license. It was, I did my TED Talk's up on YouTube, but it was early on, and that was before people. We had Gary Vaynerchuk speak at my group when he had Wine Library TV. I mean, we've always been. I learned this about myself. I'm usually 3 to 4 years before the rest of the population catches on. And right now, I'm playing with artificial intelligence and voice activated commands. I got a book coming out called Future Proofing Your Business: Dabble or Die. And it's all about, you have to dabble in order to know what's going on, especially with the tech curve that's in front of us. It's going to be something that humanity's never experienced before. That's
super intriguing to me. Like, how do you find yourself staying ahead of the curve? Because I think most people are a step or 2 behind, and here you are, like you said, you had Gary Vee on when he was doing Wine Library TV, when it was badly produced and probably had a couple thousand downloads. Like, how
it was entertaining though. There was only a couple hundred of us. I didn't realize at the time. I'm like, everybody knows this guy, and not realizing like, no, I'm one of the only. He was on Vidler back then. I remember following him on Vidler. I had over 1,000 videos on Vidler. And Vidler got shut down. I lost all my videos. Like I should have backed him up, but he was preaching Vidler, and then YouTube obviously took off. So
well, I remember so he talks about that, how he was on YouTube and switched over to Vidler, and he's like, that was probably a big mistake, but
huge. It was a mistake, but we all learn. I joined YouTube February 14th, 2005, a year to the day after it was launched. And then I had a Facebook account early on. I remember doing Facebook ads, Justin, for a penny a click. And I couldn't spend the money fast enough because people didn't know how to click on the right side of the Facebook, and they didn't know how to use the ads. Like they were just looking at them because it was such a new thing. So there's some great opportunities, but there's also, you got to understand, you have to wait for human behavior to catch on. Like right now, Instagram is where it's at for advertising wise, for what you can get for it. But you just got to be on top of it. And then I have I'm fascinated by how the future unfolds. And right now, so here's a concept, Justin. Podcasters see their show as a podcast. This is a theory a friend of mine Steve Tingeris, he kind of talks about this, and he and I elaborate on it. But there's voice-activated personal assistants right now that Google has created that right now, and they have this right now. They have a smart application that literally will, let's say John Maxwell, he's written close to 100 leadership books. It will read all 100 of his books. And then I could have a discussion with the artificial intelligence about John Maxwell's belief on any subject. And I could talk to it almost as if I'm talking to him. Wow. So you have to understand that's going to happen for podcasts. People are going to listen to everything you've ever done on audio, a computer is, and then you're going to have your own artificial assistant, let's call it. And she or he, whatever voice you want to program, could then consult with people. If you are not a big celebrity, you'll probably have that as a freemium, right, to get to you. Right. But if you're like a Gary Vaynerchuk, it depends if he wanted to, but he could charge for that time consulting with his artificial intelligent assistant.
That's amazing. Like I didn't even realize that, number one. And it's funny because like one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is like the future of podcasting and kind of where you see it going. At some point, do you think this bubble's going to burst in the podcast space as we know it?
No, there really isn't a bubble. There's a bubble with people getting on trying to get listeners. But what happens with those individuals is the moment they get 10 or 20 listeners, they're not happy. They leave.
Right.
So, you have that, and I get that. But podcasting is long form. So the interesting thing about podcasting or a good YouTube channel is you have to build an audience over time. So that really shakes out what I call the crumb snatchers. The crumb snatchers show up to see if they could grab a crumb. They don't really last because they only grab a crumb. The people that are builders long-term, they understand that they have to lay the foundation, lay some cement. Then they got to see what kind of house they want to build, how big, how small. Those people last. Those are like the Dave Jacksons of the world with the School of Podcasting. He's been doing it for like 14 years. They're not going anywhere. They understand the power of the medium. They understand that they have a loyal audience. People like my wife, she's gone through phases where she's like, oh, what do I talk about? How do I keep it interesting? But she's consistent, and she's going to keep pounding on the rock because she has thousands of women to listen to her. So those people are the bellwethers. And then you might have people like me. I'm more creative. I'll have a creative project. I'll try a concept out, see how it is. If I like it, I might pursue it. If I don't, I might sell it to someone else. Or if I have a friend that needs something, I might give them one of my creative projects. So there's different characters. So we are in a bubble that a lot of people, and you're seeing it, they want to get in. They might not last. But podcasting is going to be a slow growth. You know what you see right now? Venture capital is blowing money on all these companies.
Yeah.
When they realize that they can't make 10x, because if anyone's met a VC person, the first thing they'll tell you is like, I'm not interested in making 50% or 100%. We're making 10x. We want to make 10 to 20 times our money. So what they do is a venture capitalist, right? Mm-hmm. And over my years, I've been approached by many of them because of all the people I know, and they're always looking to see what opportunities I know.
Of course.
They want to find 10 companies, pump them all full of money, and then keep the 2 that are successful and shut down the other 8 because they're just looking to aggregate profits over the 10. Yeah. So the challenge is podcasting doesn't work that way. Podcasting is a low, slow build. Gimlet Media was built very slowly and methodically. It was a gentleman that was in the industry already. So that the VC is going to come and go. You're going to see a lot of that. But over time, the industry is going to be very stable as far as listenership, growth. A lot of the old school people will be in it. They've been in it forever. So it's just a great medium to be involved in. You've met a lot of the people. They're just phenomenal human beings, the podcasters in our medium.
Yeah, and that's the thing, too. I think the neat part about the people who aren't crumb snatchers, the people who stick it out, the people who really love this medium and understand that, look, this is the only long-form medium that we're consuming as human beings now. It's the only one.
Yeah, and also YouTube, but I know a lot of them are short, but let's say a good YouTube channel, 18, 20 minutes. But podcasting, yeah, I would agree with you. Only Joe Rogan has a 3-hour podcast that people listen to.
Yeah, and Tim Ferriss. But it's crazy when you kind of break it down and you realize that look, I have these shows that are 35, 45, sometimes over an hour. I had Bert Kreischer on the show and he was on for an hour and 20 minutes. That guy can talk. But when you break it down, I feel honored that anybody would really consume it. But the neatest part about podcasting is you can consume it anywhere. You can consume it while you're cleaning the house, while you're driving down the road, when you're feeding the kids, when you're doing whatever, working out. And you can't do that with YouTube. You can't watch YouTube while you're driving down the road. So it provides this next level of consumption. So where do you see podcasts growing to? We talked about the bubble bursting or not bursting, but what about where's it going to go next?
Well, I'm going to twist your thinking a little bit. So YouTube actually is at the forefront of a lot of things, and they just launched YouTube Premium. So you could listen to your favorite podcast on YouTube. Most people don't, and I get that. But you could, with YouTube Premium, you could shut your computer, your phone off, and it will still play the podcast that you like. So like Joe Rogan, I consume via YouTube. So you're going to see an integration for 2 reasons. As driverless cars come onto the market, Justin, it's going to free up a lot of free time, which means we're going to be able to consume. So remember, right now you consume audio because you're in a car, you're actively driving. When you're not driving, you could consume audio and you could actually consume visuals because the car's doing all the work. So you're going to see a lot of integration of all these things coming together. And that's why last year I spearheaded to have a one-day conference that we call VidFest. And this year at Podfest, we have a full YouTube conference that goes on Thursday for our podcasters and YouTubers to meet. I think it's crucial that those 2 audiences bounce into each other because you're going to see a lot of different crossovers and a lot of different integrations with them. So it's just we're going to be converging in all different ways. I know Facebook is trying to get in the game. Their live streaming is it's not the same as having it housed on a podcast or a YouTube channel. So we'll see what all these different competitors are doing. But right now, like you said, Apple having a podcast on the Apple Store and Spotify really is where most of the audience is.
Yeah.
And then if you have a video show, it better be on YouTube.
Yeah, no, and all my episodes are on YouTube, but and I used to post the full videos there, but the time that went into that to get it up and then realizing that people weren't going there to consume it, I was like, okay, well, whatever.
No, I'm in full agreement. Let me tell you something. I'm in full agreement with what you just said, because you're not going to get the impact. All I'm saying is over time, these things are all going to start blending into each other. I don't know how, but Joe Rogan's a celebrity. So he has the different, as you know, he has the celebrity factor. So when he's talking to someone, it's like Elon Musk, and then Elon Musk smokes up a joint. That's something and he's been doing it since Ustream days. I used to use Ustream back in the day. So he's been doing it for a very long time. So there's pros and cons for all different people, but I love the audio medium. And I do advise a lot of people that I'm going to be on YouTube. I'm like, you're really not going to get much out of it unless you have something visually dynamic that's going to really help your situation.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because people ask me that all the time, like, where do you see podcasts going? And I never really thought about it from that standpoint, especially when you get into the autonomous cars and all that stuff. It's just a whole nother, we could probably talk about that for another 45 minutes just because that's a whole interesting topic in itself. But I wanted to dive into, you'd mentioned it now a couple of times during our conversation, Podfest. So what is Podfest? You're now celebrating the 5th year, which is extremely exciting. How did this even begin? And I mean, this thing's massive. Like, how many people are you expecting there this year?
So it'll be around 1,000 attendees, speakers, attendees, and exhibitors. So about 1,000 total. And it got started basically that moment when Steve Cherubino showed me podcasting. I organized a conference. Really, it was a workshop. We called it a workshop a couple of months later in Sarasota. We had about 75 people. And then I did another one in Tampa, and I had another 80, 90 people. And I told my wife, I was like, we got to have a conference, a national conference. There's a need for this. And then she said, well, think about it. We're doing a lot of events. Just think about it. So I said, you know what? Next year we'll do a conference. We'll put it together. In the meantime, Podcast Movement, they launched via Kickstarter. So my wife and I bought our tickets. We want to support it. And it was amazing to watch the audience get together. So we started our conference from those 2 workshops. It was born. Then 4 or 5 months later, we went to Podcast Movement, which we loved. And then later on, we started the first, what I would call the first official Podfest. And then each year, literally, Podfest doubled in size. We went from 100 to 181 people. Then we moved it from Tampa to Orlando as an international destination. We went to, close to 400 people. Around there, I brought on a partner, John Dennis, to help me with the internet and social media marketing aspect of it. And now last year we had close to 600, and now this year we're expecting over 1,000.
Wow. Man, that's amazing. And obviously we were talking before I hit record about my event, Growth Not Movement Live, and all the work that goes into these types of things. I don't think people realize, what it takes to bring this community together, but it really is about community. And I think, we were talking about Bruce Langford, who's been on my show, and I've been on his, and how amazing he is as a human being. And like, you really start to build community with these events, because people want to come back. So how have you been able to do that? Because when you look at doubling your numbers, there's a good chance that probably 60% of your audience comes back a second time, and then so on and so forth. So like, how were you able to kind of do that and create that movement of these people who wanted to come back?
Yeah, so we're like the slow and steady. So we retain the majority of our audience, which is very rare. A couple ways, Justin. So one of the things is you have to be aware of collisions and friction points. So let's talk about those 2 concepts. Collisions are the amount of times people, literally collide into each other or meet each other. And then friction points are how can we make the experience as easy as possible for the attendee. So we have a lot of networking breaks. I have this really cool networking exercise that you'll see at Podfest that I've designed with an actuary. An actuary created a number system where I could sit people at a round table. They get a number assignment on, and basically over the course of 2 hours, they switch to 4 different round tables, and they meet 7 other individuals, and they never meet the same person twice. So all of a sudden, within about an hour and a half process, I'll have you meeting 28 people, quality connections. And then that's how we kick off the event. So we start with connections in mind and collisions. And then friction points. What are the friction points of conferences? One is most conferences, and you know this, Justin, you've been to a bunch, the education sucks. I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but most conferences, the education is very light. So our education is very specific for podcasters. It's very targeted for what they need. And then I'll review pretty much all, if not every PowerPoint that gets seen, and I'll offer feedback and have an open feedback loop with every presenter. So that's another one. And then I think it was year 2 or 3, we had such a special event and such a special community that at the end of that conference, I took the microphone and I brought it to the front of the stage. And I said, if anyone would like to come up here and tell us what you're grateful for or what you got out of the conference, the floor is open to every attendee. And since then, we have a tradition where our closing keynote is the attendees. And they line up on both sides of the mics now. And literally it'll be 40 minutes of people telling us what they're grateful for. Everybody gets 30 seconds up on the mic. And it's one of the most special, amazing experiences of the entire conference.
That's awesome. That's also scary because you said 185 people year 2, right?
Yeah, year 2. When we went to be exact, I try and be exact with my numbers. We went 100 and something, 103 or 7 the first year, and then it was 181 the next year.
Yeah, so you had 181 people, and you're like, it's up to you guys to fill 40 minutes. That's ballsy.
Well, yeah, I've done a lot of events. So here's what happens. I'll share with you some promotion techniques. So when you do that, it is ballsy because most attendees don't want to break the wall, the stage, the third wall, or whatever you want to call it. So as a promoter, here's what you have to do. You have to talk to their inner monologue that's going on. So one is you have to be silent and wait. So you're always going to have 2 or 3 people that come right up. But then here's what's happening. There's people like myself that are thinking that they want to do it, but they don't know if they want to go up there. So then as a promoter, during the first 2 or 3, then you get up on the mic and say, I know there's people thinking about it, and they're holding themselves back from coming up on the mic. I want you to come up here and not worry about that voice and just share what you have to share. And then all of a sudden, everybody shows up.
Love that. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. You have to understand your audience. And it's funny because you get that in live events and you get that in podcasting. Because I say all the time, I go, so what are you trying to do with your show? And then my second question is, okay, well, who are you trying to serve? And then I go, are you actually serving them? Right? You have to understand who your audience is, what they need, and how you're going to get them to then buy into whatever it is you're doing, whether that is to stand up, break that third wall, and get on a microphone, or to continue to listen to your show and buy into what it is you're doing from there. So where do you see Podfest, the event, going in the future?
Well, we have something special. So because we keep retaining our majority of our audience and we're growing from word of mouth, so that's what people don't get. We do a lot of marketing, but there's no replacement for word of mouth.
Yeah.
So the positive word of mouth that we have, it has a lot of momentum. I could see it being a 5,000 person event eventually. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it, but it's really, I don't see the masses. I see, when I look visually, I see the faces. I see the people that have helped build the community, and I see people having an amazing experience. So one of the things I try and design in Podfest, we want to make the beginners welcome, Justin, because you and I were beginners at one point. So I think a lot of veteran podcasters forget that sometimes. So we want to make our beginners welcome, and we want to make sure our veterans get a lot of really unique information that you can't get anywhere. So we have a startup workshop that helps anyone that doesn't know how to start on a Thursday, day 1. So that way they could catch up to the rest of us. And then I do some weird things. We have the Pazzi Award Show. The Pazzies celebrate the biggest screw-ups of the year from veteran podcasters. And that's done by design, because now the beginners are watching that and they're like, if Justin nominated himself for some award like biggest flub up or worst question I ever asked or something, it strips all the fear away. So we have a very high success factor of our beginners starting podcasts and then coming back. So a lot of that's all by design.
Yeah, that's super smart. And so what else can people expect at Podfest? Obviously, I'm speaking this year, which I'm honored, and just thank you so much for including me. So what types of things beyond that do people get? Why would a podcaster want to come to Podfest?
Well, the collaboration is top notch. So pretty much a lot of the people that you know and love are there, but we set the tone that if you're a speaker or an attendee, there is no difference in that. You're all treated equally. We try not to do what hero worship. So that creates a really nice environment for collaborations and connections. We do have an amazing sponsor that just came on board. We'll be announcing it, but they're going to be doing an amazing after party. And the after party, we're going to have podcasters playing. So our audience will be playing the music in this really amazing venue that we'll be busing people to. There'll be honestly, just amazing things. I do a treasure map. So we give everybody a treasure map to then go ask. We have each exhibitor give us a question that they want the attendees to ask. That breaks down the awkward interaction of staring at an exhibitor and them staring back at you. All you have to do is ask the question that we put on their table, and then they answer the question, and then they sign off on your treasure map. Our treasure maps will have 20, 30 exhibitors on each one. And then when you're done, you win a prize. More than likely, we'll have 300 or 400 prizes to give away, and it'll be really amazing for all the attendees. So not only do we incentivize the interaction, we gamify it.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. Like, so I'm actually speaking, but it's also my first time attending Podfest. And so I'm excited. And like you said, it's a level playing field for everybody, I think, in this space, because the one thing I've learned about all podcasters is they're hungry to learn more. They're hungry for the next level. They're hungry for connection. And I think that's why we do it, right? Like, we do this so we can connect with people. We have these conversations. And when there's amazing things like Podfest out there, you're able to then connect in person as well, instead of staring at somebody through a computer screen. Or a lot of podcasters, like we're doing actually right now due to internet connection, is there's no video. And so you don't even see the person, and it's just great conversation, but hey, let's connect and let's do all that stuff. So I love it, man. And thank you so much for being the coordinator and the guy who's put all that together for us.
Yeah, well, we have a team, and John does a lot of work. We all do work, but you had a really great presentation. And what we try and do is find talent like yourself that we haven't given the spotlight to, because you represent our medium. And when it comes to a solo breakout, those are rare. There's only like 20 of them. So we have to go through, I don't know, it's like 150 submissions just for that kind of thing. So I'm just grateful that, you and I met. You had a really great topic. I checked out your PowerPoint. It was spot on for, your information was spot on. And that benefits everybody, because I want you to look good, and I want you to help the people that come into your breakout. And for me, for anyone, I want anyone listening to this, because this is really key. A lot of people want to be keynotes at conferences, and I think keynotes are phenomenal. But what they don't realize is a breakout around a specific topic, you have the ability to change that person's life by giving them information that could help them the moment they leave your room. So that's like, if you ask me, like, I would love keynotes, but if you gave me a solo breakout where I know I'll have, minimum 50 or 100 people, whatever it is, I don't care if it's 2, but I'm just saying, like, a good breakout, I'd be just as excited about that, because I know that they're showing up for my topic. I know that the room is mine, and I have, 30 minutes to really make a difference in their lives. So I take that, as a promoter, I take speaking time as a big honor, because you're able to really transition someone's entire life. You might have a tip that someone needed that they were missing in their strategy that changes the whole trajectory of their show.
Yeah, I love that, man. And I'm a big proponent of ROI, which is return on impact. Like, for me to hear that I said something or did something that changed just one person's life or business or podcast is what I do this for, right? And that's why I have the podcast mastermind, and that's why I do all these other things. And, I just feel super honored to be able to make that impact. And so I'm glad that you and I are kind of on the same page when it comes to what it is we do and why we do it. So one question I like to ask every single person I interview, because, the thing is, I don't have people who aren't doing amazing things on my show. And so I use the word success, but I think there's so many different definitions of success. So my question for you is, what's your definition of success? And what are 3 things that you do every single day to ensure that success?
Success is not wasting the time I've been given, by being the best version of myself. So one of the things I do is I get up at 6 a.m. and I'm working on getting up at 5 a.m. But the first thing I do, my house is sleeping. The girls are all asleep. I drive to this place called Davis Islands, and I walk the water, like on this barrier wall along the water. It's about a 2-mile walk. And I reflect on what I'm grateful for. I think about these things, what you said, the future thing, like, how do I have time to think? So I take that time and I honor my thoughts. And then as I'm driving to the place and back home, I'm always listening to an audiobook, usually on 1.5 to 2x speed, ingesting some information. And then my goal is to be present when I'm with my daughters and my wife, when I get home at 5 or 6 o'clock, and also be present when I'm dealing with the amazing individuals like yourself that I get to do a podcast like this today is to be super present and in the moment and not have any. It's tough sometimes, but you have to shut that script off in the head. And that walk in the morning helps me be a success in being present and mindful of the time I have on this earth.
I love it. So one question I get all the time, which I'm interested to throw at another guy who's an influencer in the podcast space, is as much as I don't like the influencer title, saying it about myself, it sounds cheesy, but that's what we are, right? We're influencing somebody's opinion and direction. But my question for you is, who should start a podcast and who shouldn't start a podcast?
I'm big on people that are passionate about a topic and they want to help other people. Definitely should start a podcast. I don't even mind people that are, let's say, I don't know, you're a doctor and you have something to say and to help your practice. But who shouldn't start a podcast? The people that their first question is, how do I make money off this thing? And the only reason is if you lead with that, that's a problem. If you lead with, I'm really passionate and do you think I can make money with this thing, or it'd be great if I can make money, or let's figure something out. But if your initial question is, how can I make money off of this thing? I don't know. I'm more of a purist, so I'd be careful of that. Or I have people that start a podcast, they'll get 100 downloads on their first show. And they're like, I only have 100 downloads. Like, really? That's 100 people. You're impacting their lives. Yep. So no matter how many downloads someone tells me they have, my answer is that's amazing.
Always.
Because and they always look at me like weird. Like, why do you say that? I go, because you're how many people did you have impacting before you started your podcast? And they look at me with a blank, oh, you got a point. So that's kind of my thing. And you know what, Justin, just to go into these last two questions, I grew up in Oyster Bay, Long Island, in a little town called Woodbury. Oyster Bay was like the town governing all these little municipalities. And Oyster Bay is famous for having given home to the 26th president of the United States, Theodore Roosevelt. So I used to go walk to Young's Memorial, which was an old school cemetery where him and his wife were buried. And I'd walk 26 steps to go visit the 26th president of the United States. And as a child, I'd go have conversations with him and just talk about great things because he was a great human being. He did amazing things. And there was an inscription there that I then had an artist create a huge painting. And the painting is a grandfather and a grandson, because I always loved my grandfather and I wish I had more time with my grandfather. But the grandfather is pointing his cane up to the stars, showing the grandson a shooting star. And the inscription that's at the base of this painting is, keep your feet on the ground and your eyes on the stars. And that was an inscription I got from visiting Teddy Roosevelt, the 26th president of the United States. And that's kind of my philosophy for life. It's okay to have your eyes on the stars, but always keep your feet on the ground.
Dude, I love that. And it's so funny that going back to, you were talking about the numbers earlier. And I say that to everybody. I go, first thing I say to anybody who says I want to start a podcast, and I know 9 times out of 10 it's to make money, right? And they go, I'm going to grow an audience and blah, blah. I go, let's set a reality here that 80% of podcasts right now are doing less than 100 downloads an episode.
Correct. Right.
And I wait for their response. And if they're completely turned off, I won't work with them. Like, I won't bring them on as a client, because it's about so much more than that. But then on the other hand, I go, well, what do you want to do with this platform? Oh, I want to speak more. I go, okay, well, if I gave you a room to speak to every single week that had 100 people in it, would you show up? And they're like, well, yeah, of course I would show up. And I'm like, well, that's what you're doing with this podcast. So why wouldn't you continue to, do this, whether you're doing 100 downloads or 10 million downloads an episode, like, show up and deliver to your audience. But it's so true. And going back to the quote, showing up and delivering to your audience is about, keeping your eyes on the stars, but keeping your feet on the ground, because no matter who you're talking to, no matter how many, you have to show up for them. And that's just so true, dude. I love all of that. So I wrap up all these episodes with 5 rapid fire questions. But before we get there, how do people get a hold of you? How do they get tickets to Podfest? What's all the good stuff?
So for Podfest, go to podfestexpo.com. We also have a Facebook group. Feel free to join it. I'll approve you. Just, there's a question. It's Podfest Multimedia Expo Community. To contact me directly, it's chris@podfestexpo.com. And then my website is chriskrimitsos.com. If you misspell my big fat Greek last name, Google will respell it for you, but it starts with a K. So this has been a really great conversation. Can I add something?
Absolutely.
So conditioning the mind is probably the most powerful thing any of us could ever do. And for years, I got busy doing work stuff and I forgot my walks. Usually from the time I was 10 or 11 to the time I was 25, I would do a sunset walk every day. I've seen a green flash. I don't know if anyone knows what that is, but it's a phenomenon. When the sun sets, it blasts like a green flash. It happens very rarely.
Wow.
But I've been very fortunate in my lifetime to have seen at least 20 of them. And that means I've seen a lot of sunsets.
Yeah.
Somewhere in my late 20s, I was really unhappy because I was chasing money. I wanted to be a millionaire. That was my goal. And I took 6 months off. I had some money in the bank, and I call that period of my life standing in the silence. So I stood in the silence, and I went for a lot of walks at that time. And I tried to figure out, how could I functionalize my art form? So functionalizing your art form is, what are you really good at? What are your unique gifts? So for me, I'm a very amazing people connector. I love communicating, and I love speaking, and I love being a hub where my friends come together and they collaborate. So I realized that, and that's where I went into the event business, where I could create a community around live events. So we need to understand that, but here's the conditioning part that's really important, Justin. So I've done 2,000 events. That doesn't mean that they were all what people would consider successful. I've considered all of them successful, but here's, so we had a meeting early on in 2008 and 9. I was one of the first people to teach social media. Unfortunately, I didn't understand how valuable that was. So I kept it geo-local when I could have had probably the largest conference in the world, along with some other people that we know of today. But at the time, I thought there was a Chris Krimitsos in every community in America doing the same thing, but there wasn't, obviously. So I would have 50 people show up every Thursday at this meeting. We were overflowing with people. And I should have picked up that it was special when people were driving 3-4 hours away to come get this content. So 1 week, I forgot that it was Veterans Day, and we still had a meetup. And I had scheduled this amazing technologist who has since been hired by Palo Alto for his brain. And he shows up, and there's 7 attendees. So imagine this. For like a year and a half, I have 50 people showing up. The first question my attendees ask me is, where's everybody else? So what they're really saying is, what happened? Why is no one showing up? And we realized really quickly, Veterans Day, it's like a holiday and stuff. And I sat there and I was like, what do? I have this huge technologist. This guy, I really wanted to impress him. And I said, you know what? These people, these 6 or 7 people that are here with me are just as special as those 50. So I started that meeting by saying, guys, I know what you're thinking, that we have an intimate audience. And I want to tell you that this is when we have time to really bond and create relationships, when we have 7 people, that we don't have the opportunity to have 50. I could almost tell you 6 of those people are some of my best friends to this day. And the technologists had an amazing time. So it's all in how we condition our mind. Yesterday, I spoke in the afternoon to 60 people. Then I drove cross town. I went home to see my girls. And then, which I don't like speaking, but I had a commitment. I drove cross town, and a lady put 3 people in the room for me. I was just as passionate for the 3 people that I had for the 60 people early on in the day. Actually, the more intimate audiences, you actually get to do more Q&A with people and know what's in their head. But I did not sit there thinking to myself, oh, wow, they only have 3 people. How dare they waste my time? Because that's the ego telling you that people, that quantity is worth more than an individual. And that's just, that's poison.
Dude, I love that. And so freaking spot on, man. Just thank you so much for sharing that. What I want to do now is get into the 5 rapid fire questions. Some are fun, some are serious. I just ask you this: answer within 1 word or at the most 1 sentence. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
First one is, what is your favorite smell?
Coffee.
Nice. I drink way too much coffee, and the smell is amazing. What is 1 trait or characteristic in a friend that's non-negotiable? All friends must have this trait.
It's a great one. Loyalty.
If you could have dinner with 1 person, living or dead, who would it be?
Right now, Elon Musk.
Yeah, without a doubt. I'd love to pick that guy's brain. At the end of your life, if you could only be remembered for 1 sentence, what would that be?
Probably keep your feet on the ground, your eyes on the stars. I would take that from Teddy. It's the philosophy of my life.
Awesome.
And a proud father to Sedona and Savannah, and a proud husband. That's family actually is paramount to everything I do.
I love it, man. I agree with you. So obviously this podcast is called The Growth Now Movement. So I wrap up every single episode with this one question, and that is, in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
Biggest moment of growth. Well, it's definitely when the shit hit the fan. I'm just trying to think of which moment was. Yes, I'll tell you the biggest moment of growth. This is one of. In business, Katie and I had developed this amazing conference. We had 3 or 4 masterminds going on at the same time. I had created a process. I have a very unique process that we've done. And we remember that it was Christmas time, and we made an exception to put someone in that we were questionable about their attitude. That we were like, maybe they're positive, but they can be negative sometimes. That person poisoned the whole mastermind. That mastermind that one mastermind put us in the plus for profit. At the end of the year, that entire mastermind dissipated, and so did our profits. So we're looking at the new year as like, we're back at a negative after working years of bringing this whole business up. And the biggest point of growth there was having the balls to go back to one of the members that we knew to give us feedback. And in that like calamitous time, my wife was crying. She's like, what are we going to do? We work so hard. And I'm like, well, it's not that bad, but at the same time it is, right? Mm-hmm. We were able to take that feedback and then just make the process even better and then grow it even bigger than we did before. But in that moment, it felt very dark because it was Christmas time and all these celebrations and things were allocated, and overnight we lost a huge stream of income that meant we start back at zero in the new year.
Wow. Yeah, that's huge, man. Dude, Chris, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time out and sharing your message with my audience. But not only that, thank you for creating an in-person experience for people like me to be able to be a part of. I'm really, really excited about it. So please, guys, I'll link it up in the show notes. Make sure if you don't have your tickets yet, go grab your tickets, and hopefully we can connect there and grow a relationship.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to meet you in person.
Yeah, Chris, absolutely, man. We'll talk soon.
Later, Justin.
Thank you guys so much for being a part of the Growth Now movement. This is how you can really help me out. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please share it out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that fun stuff. And let's grow this movement to epic heights. And it's all going to be because of you guys. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.